you should be seeing my big purple slide there, and I want to give a little background on the survey process so far, and we've apologized for our slow start. We thought we were set, and then it turned out we weren't. And so we've switched now to where the Heartland Forward group is going to be taking the lead on helping the communities get these surveys done. And the director of research for Heartland Forward is going to be taking the lead. He's actually is another comes out of the extension service, but Oklahoma State University, and so we're excited about that. And then there's a fantastic extension person at the University of Illinois that I've worked with now for I think over 3 years in helping communities understand broadband. She's taken the lead on helping other states, Ohio, Arkansas, and now Tennessee, to implement these broadband surveys, and provides kind of a guiding force for our survey helpers to get this job done in a very straightforward fashion. So I want to thank her, and these slides are mostly hers and some of my additions, and she's going to be guiding Dave with our surveys here. And so, as always, our team, UT Extension, continues to be involved. They support the web site where all of our information is stored. You should bookmark that and make sure you can go and look at the recordings or the resource materials and so on. And so Extension is working with Reed to make that happen, and that's working well so far. So that's continues on. And then today we're going to be talking about the surveys and the networking communications to get this out the door and into your community, but the design of the survey, sampling, distribution, coverage, analysis, and timeline. So we're going to talk about all these things, have lots of times for questions. I think we'll probably get in and review the survey a little bit and show you where that is. So as we think about this process, getting them out the door and getting people to respond to it is really important. And so within your counties, we want to make sure that we're getting a good representation from the geographic area and the population to be surveyed. And some of these populations are more difficult to reach, possibly lower income folks, seniors, people with lower incomes, different geographic areas that might see themselves as apart from maybe the county seat community, and they may relate to a different regional center. So sometimes those are harder to reach with either radio or newspapers, school districts, and so on. You want to make sure that we have people involved, and it sounds like people are working on that with schools and healthcare providers, but certainly folks that can act on the results of the survey to promote technology use and adoption and so on. Groups that can contribute resources needed in conducting the survey, that would certainly, school districts are a leading force, and I understand the timeline on that, and so we're going to be hoping to jump in as quickly as we can, getting that message out and designing brochures and flyers that can push people. One community in Illinois in our last group, they just made little business cards and they left those everywhere and handed them out. And so that was a great way with it. Had a QR code and the survey web link to push people to take the survey. Very cheap to print. People can put it in their pocket and then find it later on, as opposed to a big kind of flyer and so on. So that was a great activity. So that distribution is really important, and we'll be asking you as we break into our rooms to put together that plan. And it sounds like a lot of folks have have already done some of that work, so that's great. As we think about this and get organized to do the work, and one of the nice things about having a team is asking people to make 1 or 2 phone calls and so on. And so creating this list of organizations that can help you, if we know who that point of contact is and who's going to contact them, that's a great way to spread the work. And we know that if people are invited personally, if they have a phone call to them, rather than kind of a bulk email, they're much more responsive in terms of helping. So thinking about that kind of as a strategy to break it down and split up the work is a great way to get this out the door and getting your allies in place. As we think about a broadband survey and why to do it, I think of these 3 purposes. And some of these, I think this first one in particular, has faded a little bit as the pandemic really highlighted the need for better broadband services. But really is you want to inform your local elected officials and the general citizenry about overall community perspectives on current and needed broadband infrastructure and services. And I think for a lot of people, if they have broadband, if they live in the county seat community, they just kind of assume that everyone has broadband. And so making sure that even just conducting the survey is really informational. You're molding opinions about the need for broadband. And so as you promote in your newspapers and local media on Facebook and so on, you can really be shaping that message about why your team is doing this work and the role the survey plays in that. And then as we know that in politics and budgeting, squeaky wheels can get the grease, and so that's an important part of molding your public opinion, public officials, so that when they think about spending dollars, allocating resources, pursuing this initiative, that they feel that there's broad community support to do so. And the survey can be a big part of that. The second part is to convince current and prospective ISPs to make service improvements and investments in your community. This is really an economic development project that you're trying to attract investment into your community, and investment wants a return on that investment. And so the more you can demonstrate there's a strong market for the survey or for the service and that people will subscribe, the more likely our ISPs are to be interested in your community and so on. I was just talking to a gentleman from the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association yesterday, and he's going to talk about wireless services later on in the program. But he was saying that providers often think that they want to come into a community, and then the community puts up what the provider considers to be barriers in terms of permitting and fees and other kind of challenges. And the providers just say, well, I guess I'll just go invest someplace else. And so I think you want to be really prepared to be a good partner with these ISPs as you move forward. So a lot of different ways to do that, and we have sessions later on about that in more detail. And then finally, the state or the federal government, they always want to invest in projects that are community supported. So the ability to have a survey like this that documents the need, the desire, the way that the surveys can be used to document the lack of broadband services or the lack of reliability or affordability. These surveys provide a lot of great ammunition to put into your grant applications that can turn grant reviewers' heads, and I think that's an important part of this. So I'm sure once you do the survey, making use of the survey is going to be really important. So we think there's great information here. As we think about the design of the survey that you'll be using now has been used by generally about the 20 different county initiatives across multiple states. We've tweaked it as we go, as we see challenges or maybe a lack of clarity in the questions. We'd really encourage you not to ask us to make changes in the language of the surveys. If you need to add a question or two, we can do that, but try and leave the outline of the survey alone, and the questions that are there, try and leave those alone, and limit your requests for changes to additional questions that you may have locally. We're giving you the chance to test drive that survey, and you'll find that they have some different branching in there. For example, if you say you don't have broadband, you get a very limited set of questions about why not, and so on. If you say you're a farmer, you get a set of questions that we had just developed for the state of Illinois and the Soybean Growers Association. You can look at those questions and decide whether you want to keep those in your community survey. And then finally, of course, if you say yes, you have broadband, we ask quite a number of questions about the service quality and the speeds and so on. We'll give you a unique survey address, so your county will have their own survey. Your data won't be merged in with the other folks. Of course, that can be a little long, so we can also create the short URL that can point directly to that survey. And then you wanted, of course, to design your distribution materials. And one of the key things is for you to do that introductory messaging that we can put at the front of the survey, and as we've talked about, include community-oriented logos that people know, oh, this is us doing the survey. It's not a broadband provider, it's not the state, it's not the federal government, it's our community. One of the most important questions, the one I love, is just an open-ended question, asking people to say, what is your broadband story? And we, communities generally get, I think in Illinois, one community said they had 50 pages of comments, and some of them are humorous, some of them are heartbreaking, about people whose telehealth systems won't work, with people with stage 4 cancer, and the impact on their family of poor broadband. And so there's provides an incredible amount of qualitative information that you can use, again, with local elected officials, community messaging, and grant applications. So that's always a very interesting and kind of a fun question. When we think about the responses and how many is enough, and the random sample, a lot of times, obviously, when in the political campaigns, they do phone calling and so on, and come up with a random sample and plus and minus degrees of accuracy and reliability. In this survey, our goal usually is to get about 400 responses per county. And once you hit that 400, 450 mark, chances are that no matter how many more you get, the results really aren't going to change. At the same time, we ask you to try and get as many responses as you can, because again, you're trying to convince the providers there's strong interest. And when we plot these survey responses on maps, in some ways that's almost their market study, that's their preliminary engineering study, where they can see, okay, which roads can we go down and get X number of customers, and so on and so on. And so when we talk about this is really what we encourage, is this convenience or cluster sample, where we're just really trying to push it out through a variety of ways, get as many people to respond as possible. So when people say, well, what's your reliability of this survey? We're not really going far out on the limb to give them those plus minus things. And this, I'm not really a statistician, so I'm kind of in dangerous territory here. And I'm sure Dave can tell us more with his PhD, but we're pretty confident, and we know that these providers really love these surveys and the information that we collect. We do try and collect contact information, physical address, email address, that we ask if we can share with providers. And the idea of if you find a provider partner and you can give them addresses and contact people and you decide to move forward with them, that can really shorten their sales process, which of course reduces their costs, which makes it higher response rates and to marketing and better take rates. We'll be able to provide you with maps of coverage, and so you'll be able to see where are we getting surveys, where are we not getting those surveys, and if you need to boost response in some places, you can really get hyper local and push that out in a variety of different ways, mailings or door to door, however that's going to happen. And so I think this is a great way to measure that community sentiment about broadband services.
Is the completion of the personal information required, or is that optional to going through the digital survey?
It is optional.
Okay.
Yep. And then we ask them to opt for permission to share as well. And so they could provide their name and contact information for you to use, but then to share it with a broadband provider is a separate checkbox that they okay that. And then we'll be able to provide reports that segregate that information, so only those that have given permission, those are the only ones you'll see.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times we have distribution, your networks through your population. Emailing can be great, and that same messaging can be used on a cover letter on a paper version. You can use a QR code, and that's great to get people to the website. The challenge there is that, you know, QR codes really generally are dependent on a camera, so it's a mobile device or, you know, a phone or tablet that people are using. And we just want to always make sure that we know what we're measuring when people do a speed test, whether that's cellular data, you know, or their primary home connection. And we know it does get complicated. For some folks, their cell connection is their primary connection. And so we try our best to differentiate those things. And then you can see really the list here. We've seen people do a lot of radio shows, local TVs, and so on. This idea of a phone number to call if people have problems or they don't have an internet connection, but they want to do the survey. And sometimes that person who can take those calls can just do the survey for the person online. And so they can ask the questions over the phone. And then public libraries, other places where people can take the survey, or we've had people take them at the grocery store, and we set up a table and ask people to take the surveys, or at county fairs, all kinds of different places. And of course, then, you know, you're asking, well, maybe you're not getting the speed test data there, but you are getting the community sentiment, and that's also very valuable.
Since you guys have done, I think you said 16 other surveys, is that what the medium was where you were most successful in taking the survey? Do you have data on that, or is that available to kind of tell us, hey, the digital channels, you got, you know, 60% that way, and the phone channel may be something we want to kind of do at the end if we can't get them?
Yeah. getting it out, I think the most successful marketing is through the schools. And one thing I'm not sure, I don't remember if it's in these slides or not, is about the use of incentives to get people to do that. And in one case, we had 2 school districts competing to see which district could get the greatest percentage, and the school is going to win a pizza party or something. And essentially then kids cheated. And so that was turned out to be a little bit of a disaster with multiple responses from the same addresses. And we can filter that out, but it turned into quite a bit of work for the survey organizers to do that. And so we really ask that you minimize the incentives. And if you put a survey online with an incentive, people who run bots can, if you say, oh, we'll give you a $10 gift card or something, people cheat on that, and all of a sudden now you have people from outside the county completing the survey and so on. So it's the incentives is really a double-edged sword.
Bill, real quick, my wife and I run a charity for my brother who passed away, and so each year we put out a single page that goes to the elementary schools in Roane County, and that single page goes home with the kids, and then they fill that out with their parents. And so basically it's their name, address, and then do they need a pair of shoes, and if so, what's the size shoes they need. And so each year for the last 4 years, we've have supplied somewhere between, this year will be about a little over 5,000 pairs of shoes going out to all the different elementary schools in Roane County. So the offices at the schools are very, very good to work with as far as distributing them, collecting the forms when they come back, and then getting them to us. So, that we've just had a lot of success working directly with those, schools offices, and that's just in the elementary school that we were working. Oh,
very good. Good. Thanks for that. And schools, obviously they have a strong self-interest in getting kids connected. As we know, even post-pandemic, kids need internet to be able to do their homework and full educational experience.
Bill, I'm sorry, I was going to interject that one of the other ideas that worked really well for some of our counties was asking whether there were any mailers going out either through the county or the city, or the electric bill or the water bill, and you can put a flyer in to have people do that. And of course, you're just piggybacking on a mailing that would normally have happened anyway. That was very successful. There were also a very small town we worked with, about 1,000 people. They did door to door, and they got, was it Bill? They got 500 plus responses. So they had a 50% return, and it was, quite extraordinary that, cause they didn't have any internet, so they couldn't do the surveys online. So they ended up doing a kind of walk around in their village. Had a bunch of volunteers.
Good, thank you. Great addition there. And then paper copies and multilingual versions. And so paper copies you can distribute at events, especially targeting folks that may lack computers or internet, having helpers to overcome reluctance at at a table where actually have a computer that you can. Because some people who don't have internet don't have a computer nor the skills to even click and log on to a survey like that. Libraries and senior centers. And then with the paper copies, you'll have to have somebody to do the data entry. And it really takes, once you're got the hang of it, really less than 5 minutes per survey to enter that. So you can enter quite a few in an hour. And that might be something that high school kids could do for hours, service hours, and so on. And then we do have a Spanish paper version that's available, and we want to make sure that those surveys follow are consistent to ease data entry. And I need to talk with, and Nancy can help us with that. She's been really the one who's helped there, and she's happy to help us just to make sure we've got that right. And we'll work that out. I know that Bedford is very interested in a Spanish survey, and if there's other languages that you need to consider, let's talk about that. And then having team members who can promote the survey in the various languages, and folks who can translate comments would be very good to have on board. There's asking people to do that speed test, and we have places to do both a cellular speed test and your landline or your fixed connection speed test. And so it gets very complicated when people are sitting there at home. They may not know which network their phone or tablet or computer may be on. And so to try and clarify that, get people to think about that, we do the best we can with that, and we can segregate the speed test by provider types as well. So there's ways to make sure that we're getting great information there. But we do try and pay a lot of attention to that, and we built that information right into the survey form. And then just messaging, and you can look at these, and of course these slides will be available. But why do you want people to take this survey? And depending on your community or different audiences or distribution channels, you can use these kind of messages as a starting point for your own personal messages. And then we've seen postcards and business cards and so on that can be used to promote that. And then finally, the timeline. You know, I know that we're definitely in a rush. We want to make sure that we are complete with our data collections so that we can bring this into the community planning at the end of the session. So here's kind of a checklist as you do your planning, that you're able to create your timeline. In terms of the survey, as we go into the session, our work session, you can kind of go through these kind of process about, you know, who, what, when, and where on the survey. We email that to you on Friday, so you might want to try and retrieve that and use that as a guide for your discussion. Each week, we usually have a worksheet that we ask you to go through the primary topic of the day before you start to discuss more fun things or more interesting things in your team as you go forward. So this was one of them. So in terms of timelines, and I know it's funny, I'm telling you, we need to be quick about it when we've been slow, so I really apologize for that. But here's, we want the planning sessions begin July 24th. And so we need to, as we work with Dave to understand his deadline for being able to produce the reports, we're gonna have to work back. But so I would look at, you know, July 10th maybe as a deadline for closing down the survey. You know, it's quite, we can leave the surveys open in an ongoing fashion and allow you to keep building your response totals. But in terms of kind of a report that we would produce, that July 10th is kind of the deadline. And then here's our key survey resources. Dave Schdiler, who is the Chief Research Officer for Heartland Forward, and he is a former Oklahoma State University professor and internet broadband services researcher, and he's now the Chief Research Officer for Heartland Forward. So he's familiar with community broadband surveys. He's familiar with the statistical machinery to make this happen. And so he's really stepped up for this unexpected task. He's on a holiday this week, and so he wasn't able to join us. But he and I corresponded this morning, and he's all set to really receive your survey intro text. So if you want to send it to both Dave, you can see his address there, and to me, I'll make sure that he gets it, and we can work with Nancy at Illinois to stay on track, and with her guidance, Dave will be an excellent, strong resource for us here on these surveys, and we'll get them done. So questions or reactions?
So I noticed the link to the survey has Illinois in it.
Yeah, that's just a test survey.
Oh, okay.
Because we weren't able, due to our chaos, we weren't really able to set up our own test site. And so but the survey is the same, and that data on the test won't be ever used. It will just be eliminated, but it's just an opportunity for you to go through the survey.
But that is the link that they would use? Am I misunderstanding?
That's what you should use. But when you won't publish that, you just use that within your own team as a test. So you can go through and see how it works. And, you know, the paper copy that we sent you is essentially the same thing that's online, although the branching becomes more clear when it's online. But you'll want to go through that, click on that link, go through it a few times and vary your responses so that you can kind of see all aspects of the survey. And then when it comes time for your survey to be launched, and this will happen early next week, you'll get your own unique survey link that you'll use to publicize the survey.
I can send the link in the chat right now to the test survey if that's good, Bill.
That'd be great.
And so at that point, it says Tennessee, it has your letter on the front, et cetera. Right.
On that Illinois survey, it does ask whether you're on a wired service or cellular service or no service. Got that. But there's no place to put down what your actual provider is. Is that would that be a good thing to have, to know which provider you're using?
Yeah, and we do ask that, I think, later in the survey. We definitely ask that. And Reed has got a list of providers by county. And so we will insert your unique list of providers into a drop-down checkbox kind of thing. And so you can, you know, you may, but you can look at that list. And if you know of other providers, that would be, we can add those in. But these are the providers that are filling out what they call the FCC 477 forms, where they claim to provide service in your county. You may be surprised of the companies that say they provide service in your county that you've never heard of. And so some of that is their fantasy and some of it is reality. But so we'll put that list in into your test survey.
Okay, and I heard what you said, but I've taken the survey 4 times myself. There is no place where the providers are listed in Illinois, nor is there any provision to take a speed test in that Illinois link.
Let me look at that. I'll look at that right away after the meeting, or even in the second hour. But yeah, that's definitely a standard question in the survey. So I'll go through there and see if I can figure that out.
So, Bill, I've got a quick question. You're telling us the link that you drop down in the box, that's the survey that we use, or are you gonna mail out the updated survey to all of us once you put the provider drop down boxes in? So we're not to share the one we got. That's just to look at.
Yeah, do not share that with your
Okay.
community. Yeah.
Wanted to make sure. Thank you. And will that say Tennessee? in it
Yep.
As opposed to Illinois? Okay.
It sure
I might have
will.
missed that part. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and most likely it'll have kind of a Heartland Ford address on it, because they'll be the host of the database thing. And so you'll be able to put your own logos on the survey. So in addition to the messages that you want to say at the intro paragraphs, we'll want to, if you have various partners on your projects, I don't know if you want to say, Connect Claiborne, if you have a name for yourselves yet, or whatever your logo is, or whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or the county or multiple logos, we'd be able to accommodate that. There we go. So Donovan says, who is your current ISP? Populates for me in the third page. Download, upload, speed test prompts are on that page for me. So I'm reassured. That's good that it's there. And so we'll have to figure out why you're not seeing that in Roane County.
I apologize. Did you say when we thought we would have it available?
I hope
I'm just trying to back into the days.
End of next week, he's
Okay.
saying.
And so once,
Thank you.
yep. And so I know this is a real priority. Dave has taken this, so he'll be back in the office Monday. And if you have, if he has your logos and your intro letter, then he can create those unique for you.
Yeah, you got a computer.
Our discussion in the room was when you said logo, and is that, how do we think about the county logo, or how are groups thinking about what logo they would use on their survey?
So we see sometimes that a community would use just the county logo, and this is an official thing. Others want to say, look at, who's on our steering team, and, some people might not like the government, but the chamber's involved or the school district's involved. And so I think I would encourage multiple logos that shows that this is a widespread community effort with broad support.
Roane County here, we have a draft of our cover letter, and within that cover letter, we wanted to provide the link. So would that be something?
Yeah, well, so why don't you send the cover letter as it is, and then we'll insert the link.
Okay.
Just leave a spot there for it.
Okay. And again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm a retired engineer. I can't help myself. The link that reads on May 12th, it was like 9 a.m. I think it's 9:03 a.m. The link to the Illinois survey, it does not have the drop down nor the speed test in it. Now you're saying read the one that you just dropped in. Does it have all that?
Yes. I just took the one. I can't speak for the one I sent a few weeks ago, but the one I just sent, I tested it as well, and it has it.
Okay. Well, on that same email, you had a survey from Edgar County, and it did have it, but it was 20 pages. It had all the farming questions in it.
Yeah.
That's not an issue for us.
So, yep. So you can just tell us whether you want to keep those farm questions or not. That would be another decision for your team. And that was that effort was sponsored by the soybean growers. And so, and remember on a paper survey, pages kind of multiply because they, you know, at the big spacing and responses and so on. It really takes about 5 to less than 10 minutes for sure to do this survey. And most of the people who will take a paper survey don't have internet. So the preferred way is for people to take the survey online. And then the paper survey, generally, we see many more responses of people who don't have internet service. And if people want to take the survey from the library and put their home address in, you know, they can take the survey that way. You know, they're at the library, they wouldn't be doing a speed test, for example.
But can I ask a quick question? When we have the survey option or the link, can you have the option to take it in English and Spanish?
That's a little bit of an escalation that we would have to, let me check with, that'd be let me check on that.
Okay.
That would certainly be preferable. Good. And Roan, have you guys tried the survey link now that is in the box?
I don't think we're savvy enough to even do that when we're all together here.
Okay. Well, maybe once we're in our breakout room, you can do that and so
Okay.
on. Good. Otherwise, let me just do this.
Send an email somewhere.
I didn't see an email
But where to go?
with the survey link. I only saw the paper survey.
No, it was embedded in the one that had the paper.
It was.
Bill, I just opened that link that Reed sent and I am not seeing the list, the drop down for the providers or the speed test.
I can share my screen and we can walk through it.
Yeah,
Yeah, why
okay.
don't you? I think that
Okay.
would be a really good idea, Reed.
Sure.
Sorry.
No. No
Because I
problem.
know we're going to get in the rooms and get questions, so I want everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
All right. Does everyone see?
Kenny, started on May 12th.
Yep.
Okay,
Ken,
so
what do you need? Ken, do you have a question? Or are you not? Okay.
we're good. Okay, so this is the first page, and we'll do home. I guess, do we need a? This second page has the kind of, if you have fixed internet service. So if you do, you hit that one, fixed internet, non-cellular at this property. How many computers, smartphones, other devices, and then the next page. If you have selected that you have internet, you'll get who's your primary internet service provider. So maybe we have Comcast here, and then to the best of your knowledge, what's your download speed? Maybe we have 26 to 50, maybe we have 10 to 25 up, and then you get your satisfaction questions on your affordability, speed, and reliability, and then you're prompted to go take that speed test down here, and you click the link. It'll open a new tab to speedtest.net, and we can run a speed test. Do the speed test here. And well, it'll do the upload as well, but you get the idea. Would put the download and then the upload from these two numbers up here into these two boxes and then move on. And then it keeps branching about what you're using the internet for, how much you'd be willing to pay for an internet service, what you're using internet for, or hope to use your internet for, and your kind of opinion about your choices about ISP's choices in your area. And then, like Bill said, the broadband story question. And then that's the end.
So Reed, I was going to say, I think what's going on is people like me, we're looking at the survey, not realizing that as you fill it out, new information appears or branches.
Correct.
That may have been why Roan wasn't seeing the provider or the speed test question.
Right. So if we said, I don't have any internet service at this property, I think it'll branch, right? Yeah, so it does. It now it would. It doesn't ask me for that speed test, and it doesn't ask me what my provider is because I've already told it that I don't have one. And so that in that case, you would not see that that list of providers and then the speed test question.
And looking at the link,
Hey,
if people start to fill out several questions and they're like, hey, wait, this is too long. Do you capture that data?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think it's the first question where it says individual business farm, that you check all that apply. So you only, so if I'm a business, so if I wanted to fill it out, I would fill it out as an individual. I live on a farm, so I'd fill it out as a farm. I also work at a school, so I could fill it out for my business or school or whatever. So I would check all three of those, but how do you know which one? Does it give you three different surveys, or how does that work?
So if you're going to, this is all about the at where you are taking it. And so the type of the property. So you could have a home, which is also your farm, or you could have a home, which is also your business, but it's still your single connection. So then if you wanted to take it from the school, for example, you could do that. Or if you have a business site, you have a downtown retail business, you could do it from your business site from that address.
So I personally would take it twice.
Yes.
What you're saying.
Yep. And we've had some farmers take it multiple locations because their farm has multiple locations. And that was more on the cellular side where they were testing cell service in different spots on their farm or multiple farms.
How far apart do those farms need to be in order to be considered different farms? If they're within a mile of each other, does that count as one location? Or if you get different amounts of cell service?
Well, we don't get that particular. So how motivated are you? So, you know, I think that'd be the question to, you know, if somebody a mile apart, maybe you wouldn't do it, but if they're 5 miles apart, maybe yes. That's a pretty small number of the people taking the survey. So, and then of course farms are, if it's just fields, then, you know, there's probably not a place to hook up a fixed wireless kind of connection, or maybe there is with a well or some kind of grain bin monitoring system and so on. So I think we're trying to capture the preponderance of the evidence about the quality of broadband and people's satisfaction with it.
Any more questions on the survey itself that we can walk through? If so, if not, I'll stop sharing here.
So, and all the questions you have are great ones, and we've gone through them with, and that's how we've ended up modifying our survey. And we might make modifications after we work with Tennessee based on something we find to try and clarify something or continue to perfect the survey. but we're pretty confident that people can take the survey, can complete it, and be done with it in relatively short order, and yielding some very good information.
Okay, this is Roane County. I'll have to admit, I found the discrepancy. I was trying to print out the survey so we could discuss it today, and I just going through and printing the blank pages.
I see.
Like when you input data, it expands, which that was unknown to me. So I was just trying to be helpful to our group here so we could discuss it.
No, thank you for that. No, that's a good.
Good. I was having a little bit of palpitations also.
Well, so was it. So anyway, it's my mistake.
No, that's right, Tony. No problem. And you know what? I learned in Cub Scouts, never criticize adult volunteers, you know, so you lose them pretty fast if you do that. And so that's just the part of the deal. And that's why I encourage you to go through those links and take it multiple times. And I think you'll find the survey is very solid. You don't end up where it kills your computer or at the dead end or anything. So we're pretty confident in that. And the beautiful thing about this Qualtrics program is that the Illinois one can be shifted right to Tennessee with, and then they can go in and edit it and take out the words Illinois and take out other things and add in what we need to do with your list of providers and so on. So I think we'll be in good shape in short order. I know it sounds like have lots of work to do, and my new buddy Dave does have some work to do, but he's pretty confident he can crack it up pretty fast. And I know his boss at Heartland Ford is highly motivated to help Tennessee communities get this done. So I'm sure it's at the top of his pile.
So Billy, you mentioned there's David working on it, and then also a Nancy. What are the roles there?
So David is in charge of the Tennessee surveys, and Nancy is there to assist him. So Nancy works for Illinois Extension and really enjoys mentoring others on the implementation of this survey. So she's done more of these than anyone, and so has and is very generous with her time. Just off-budget work activity for her to help communities in other states get this done.
So going back to the webinar that you sent us, which by the way was very good. I don't know if everybody has taken it. I would highly recommend the webinar on the survey that was sent, I think just Monday or Tuesday. In there it described the different levels, different methods of surveys, and they talked about a statistically significant survey versus canvassing. And basically canvassing is a shotgun, and I think that's what we were planning on doing, using the schools, the utilities, the extension office, and just going everywhere. But that wouldn't necessarily be statistically significant. And I understand what that means, but I don't know how to design a survey that would be statistically significant. So who could help us with that?
And so the survey design wouldn't change, but the distribution would change. And so if you were going to do a statistically valid survey, you would maybe take the county's property list and say, okay, we're going to do every 10th property and send them the survey. And you would separate business out, and maybe you would, you know, say, okay, we want property that has a house on it or something, and then send a mail survey to that group. And then you would need to get a certain number back to say that that's, you know, statistically it's reliable. They say at the 95% confidence level that says 95% of the time this survey results are going to be accurate within 3 to 4%. And you see these on the political surveys where they decide what the whole country thinks based on 1,000 responses. And I think there's some validity to that if you're going to be making kind of, looking at a snapshot in time. I think for the Canvas, I believe, is actually a more effective way to do community broadband planning, because if you, in Roane County, if you get 1,000 responses back, which is way more than you need for a valid survey, you're really showing providers the real strong interest in broadband. And you're also coming up with 1,000 people's names who say they want broadband, which again, if you want to share this with your preferred provider partner, that's a powerful marketing tool for them to already have names, addresses, emails of people who say they want to buy this. And so that's an important shortcut for their sales process, which could save them thousands of dollars, as opposed to marketing through newspaper ads or sending. A lot of times they'll send people door to door as they think about building a network, or as they start to build it, to get people to sign on for service. So if you can shorten that process where people say, hey, they can send out a bulk email and say, hey, click here to sign up for our service. And all of a sudden now 800 people sign up at virtually zero cost to the provider. That would save them a lot of money and time.
Well, Bill, real quick about that though, there's a big difference between providing service, so in other words, if you've got an area that's got a fairly high density of population, houses, and such, that, is obviously a smarter plan to go after one of those. Whereas if you get into something that's, very rural, then your cost to provide that is going to be much, much higher, because there's nowhere near the rate of return. So, I would think that there's got to be demographics. Well, I know there's demographics in Roane County, for instance, that there's high concentrations of houses with no service. But, it looks like to me we would, try to concentrate or focus on some of those, and then typically in those, you're going to see that they're maybe a little bit more affluent. And so they may, have a little bit more disposable income for the service if it became available.
Yeah, and so I think you're right there that, number one, it certainly costs a lot more to provide service out in the rural area. And that's why the state has broadband grants to overcome those costs. The survey can help document that. The survey asks questions about what people are willing to pay. And of course, they always kind of lowball that. Who would say, well, I'll pay whatever it costs. They always say, well, I'll pay $50 or $60, but the providers are pretty well used to sorting through that information, knowing that people actually pay more for service than what they say, because they really want it. And based on their own customer experience in their other locations, they can pretty well estimate on pricing. But the other thing that points to is if you have a bunch of people say they can only pay $10 or $20 or $30, that really shows your need to get out there, and maybe this is an offer to the provider, is to really strengthen your affordable connectivity program outreach so that you can help these lower income folks afford to subscribe.
Bill, sorry, I want to make sure that I heard one of the points that was made by Roane. You don't want to avoid sending the surveys out to places that are already quote unquote served, because these people may be unhappy with their service and willing to change if a new provider came into town. So the point is, you want to have, because we ask people how they feel about their service, and as Bill alluded, we had a county that had 50 pages of comments, and I don't know whether this is a provider for you in Tennessee, but in Illinois, Frontier is just so belittled for its service and it's the quality of its internet service plus its customer service, that the point is any new provider that would come into the area, they would have tons of Frontier customers who would look at switching. So you don't want to avoid a served area because you may find out information about how they feel about their current provider that would be helpful to a competitive provider that would come into town.
And also then the speed tests will
Right.
help document the provider, like we'll just pick on Frontier. You know, the provider would say, oh, well, we have 50 megabit service there, 100 megabit service. But then when the speed tests come and everyone has 5 or 10 megabits on the speed test, it kind of shows that the Frontier network isn't really delivering what Frontier folks would say it's capable of. And, you know, sometimes then Frontier would come back and say, well, they're all buying our 10 megabit package. And in today's age, if a company is selling a 10 megabit package, that really means their network is pretty, deficient. Most companies that have high quality networks, 50 meg or 100 meg service is really the minimum level of service they're offering on today's modern broadband networks. And so, if they say, well, we still have these 10 megabit packages and it's $39 or $49 for 10 megabits, that's a pretty poor value when places are offering gigabit service for $75 or $100 a month.
Well, real quick, let me ask to her point right there. Is this then going to give? Is there something then that's going to happen legislative wise that would turn around and open up what are, these areas for competitors to come in? Because today, how it actually works in the state of Tennessee, you have franchised service providers for particular areas. So in other words, Rowan County, for instance, only really has 3. You have AT&T, Comcast, and Charter. Those are the only 3 franchise service providers. So for a CLEC, competitive exchange carrier, to come into that area, you would have to go. That would have to be done through the legislative branch, that would then turn around and allow additional competitors.
No, I don't really believe that is true. I'm not familiar with Tennessee specifically, but the 1996 Telecom Act says states cannot restrict competition. And so somebody may be required to go and get a license to offer, especially telephone service. Internet is really essentially unregulated business, that there's states can't really do anything that would restrict somebody from coming in and providing service. Now, traditionally, a franchise is done at the local level for cable television, where in the past, cable companies had to pay 3 to 5% of their revenues to the local unit of government for franchise fees. Now with over the top, where so many people are dropping cable, that and what's the video service? That's internet service providers don't need to have a cable franchise to offer Hulu or Disney Plus or YouTube TV. And so we can do some checking on that, and maybe Reed, if you want to do a little investigation there. But I think what I'm saying is correct, that just because a company, I don't think there's restrictions on where companies can go. I know that there's restrictions, or have been restrictions, on either municipal broadband services, or in some cases electric cooperatives, about where they can offer services. But we need to do a little more investigation about that, and later on we'll have a little more legal talent on board to help us when we get to local and financing and local powers.
Okay, I mean, I've just done it for 49 years, and have been on the regulatory side as well. And I know you're right. At the county level, you have to have a franchise agreement in place with the local county government to be able to operate in that particular county. So, for instance, in Roane County, again, there's only the three. There's only AT&T, Comcast, and Charter.
Okay.
So I'm not arguing with it. I'm just saying we got to be a little bit cautious, because if somebody looks at this and goes, "Oh, there's 5,000 customers over there," we're going to run over there, and it's kind of like strip annexation is the way I look at it. A neighboring city, let's say Oak Ridge, Tennessee, looks at an area that's inside of Roane County, but it's got a growing population base and a large subdivision residential development. They come in and strip annex it, and now it's, quote, part of Oak Ridge City, but yet it's 10 miles from the city limits of Oak Ridge. So I don't see a lot of strip annexation of ISPs, simply because of the burdensome amount of build out cost, pole right attachment agreements, which are $13.50 per pole, per year, or then, right of ways buried, so forth. So anyway, I'm just.
Okay. Well, I think Donovan has a comment. Go ahead, Donovan.
Thanks, Bill. So without getting too into the weeds, I just wanted to add a few things to that point. Obviously, there are restrictions in place for, as you mentioned, municipalities, electric co-ops, and in some cases, the local exchange carrier. There is a difference between that are governed a lot differently. But for the original question, yes, there will be opportunity in the future. Probably not in terms of overbuild. We do at the state plan on running a middle mile program that has a last mile component to it that will be open to the state. And without getting into those details, there will be a challenge process for the validity of eligibility, and then additional funding coming from state and federal level both, which obviously will be regulated and governed differently. But that will allow for additional expansion and then some additional funding on the county level, or on the, we'll call it the polygonal level, that may not encompass a whole county, but parts of it. So regulations,
that's some
not
good
super,
information.
anyway,
We really
just wanted to touch on a couple of those points.
That's some great information. Is there any way we can kind of segue into our breakout groups, because we're under a 2-hour limit and we've got people anxious here,
Yes.
as those who have to go. So is there anything else we need to kind of start wrapping up and we can get to our breakouts?
Yes, and we can do that right away. Monroe asked about to see the survey data in real time. That's not likely, I don't think, but periodic updates might be possible. And so let's just, so I think that adds most of the questions. So once I have a good conversation with Dave, I think we'll be able to bring more clarity to our next steps on the survey. Thanks to Blana, we got all the information we need from Monroe County. So that's in the hopper now, and I've sent it on to Dave, and we're in good shape. So thank you. Reed, let's go to the breakout rooms.